Welcome to Wesley Impact. I'm Keith Garner. What would you say the most important thing is in your life? Thank you for joining us. It's wonderful to have your company. Today I'll be speaking with someone who's no stranger to the screen. Gennie Nevinson is an accomplished actress, voiceover artist, storyteller, but she began her career as an 8-year-old child actor in the film Greyfriars Bobby. Her career spanned more than 50 years in the entertainment industry and includes credits on popular television programmes and films, such as the British series Minder, The Bill, and in Australia on programmes including Sons and Daughters, Water Rats, Home and Away, Packed to the Rafters, a great list, with films like Muriel's Wedding and Babe, all hits in their own way. We'll be speaking with Gennie about her career, the various roles she's played, and where her faith fits into her public profile and her work. And then Gennie's going to perform a short piece called Along the Path. I'll share some thoughts on Paul, the greatest of all biblical writers. In this series, we've been looking at characters from the New Testament. And apart from Jesus himself, no one has been the theme of so much written material in the history of Christianity than St. Paul. This giant of a man made such an enormous impact on the world through his thought and leadership in the important early years of Christianity. He's many things: an evangelist, a theologian, a leader. At Wesley Mission, we seek to provide a wide range of services in the most effective and relevant way possible to the people we serve. For the past 200 years, we've continually adapted and changed the services so that we can adapt to the day in which we're in. I'd like to invite you now to take a look at the scope of the work we do at Wesley Mission.
Bolstered by our strong Christian roots, the organisation has a vibrant spiritual centre that we call Wesley Congregational Life, encompassing worship services, community groups and pastoral care. In fact, during Wesley Mission's early days, it was this same congregation that would go out into the community to assist those most in need. Today, however, we've expanded to operate in 11 specialist service areas. Wesley Family offers a range of services to assist struggling families of all backgrounds. Wesley Youth assists disadvantaged young people to connect with others while learning vital life skills. Wesley Seniors works hard to address the growing needs of Australia's ageing population. Wesley Foster Care Services provide security, support and genuine care to children in need of a safe place to stay. Wesley Disability Services provides those living with a disability with a wide range of support programs. Wesley Homeless Services offers accommodation and resources to those struggling with homelessness. Wesley Counselling Services offers free or low-cost counselling to those who need it most. Wesley Mental Health Services provides vital counselling, inpatient and day patient treatments, as well as suicide prevention resources. Wesley Carer Services provides much-needed respite and support for carers. Wesley Help at Home Services offers in-home support to allow both older people and those living with a disability to maintain an independent life. And finally, Wesley Employment Training and Conferences provides opportunities on all sides of the employment spectrum, also running professional conference centres in both the city and at our bushland retreat. In summary, Wesley Mission currently provides over 130 different individual programs supported by over 1,900 employees and nearly 4,000 volunteers to assist over 19,000 families and individuals every year. As you can imagine, however, we are always looking for ways to do more. Over 44% of households suffer from financial stress. Of those, 28% develop a diagnosed mental illness, and 10% experience domestic violence. Avoiding your finances makes it even worse. So Wesley Mission offers much needed support to help families face their financial future stress-free. Donate today to help families face their future stress-free.
When you consider the entertainment industry, I wonder what comes to mind. Television, radio, feature films. Gennie Nevinson is no stranger to all of these. All forms of entertainment, to a career that spans more than 50 years. And that 50 years has not ended, because now you're involved, I know, in a radio programme, Rima FM on the central coast of New South Wales. Gennie, it's great to have you on the programme.
Thank you.
You had a long and distinguished career behind, well, in front of that camera. Tell us how it all began.
Well, my mother was an actress, and they were looking for a kid to play a part in Greyfriars, probably a film, Walt Disney film many years ago. And that's how I started. Started as, I got tested and got the part, and then I did several television things as a child. And then my mother said, you know, go and learn the oboe, and you may not want to be an actor anymore. So I had a break, but I was hooked, kind of.
I was going to say, did you get the bug then, and it was going to carry on?
Yeah.
Yeah. What's the thing that you most enjoy doing?
I love being in television series. I think it's a kind of family thing. It's being, you know, I like going to work and putting on the clothes and being somebody else, but I love the whole family when you're making a project together, you know, whether it's home and away or whatever it is, I just, you know, I'm hooked on being with actors and with people who make television.
And of course you did that in Britain in series like The Bill and Minder, but then you entered into the Australian genre very simply, and got involved in some of those household name films. What was it like growing up in the entertainment industry?
Well, my mother was a solo mum, and I actually went to boarding school very young, and she was probably the first professional in her family. So she was very courageous in many ways. She was with the Royal Shakespeare Company in the 40s and had a large body of work herself. Jewish background, and the youngest of family, and so I mean it was chaotic. My mother was a very chaotic and dramatic character. So yeah.
So would you say that your work somehow shaped your worldview?
Yeah, I would say in perhaps not a very positive way, I think, because everything depended on, what you came up with, I don't know how authentic you are as an actor who's looking for work and getting work. Everything depends on how do you look and what you can, come over. And I think, I often think if I'd been a Christian in those days, I would have had much more solid foundations in what really mattered.
I suppose the question you might ask of an actor, you might want to ask is, did you ever worry that the job you were doing is going to be your last job?
Oh, definitely. I mean, especially when I was dependent on it for money. Absolutely. And also you're only as good as your last job. People forget very quickly. If you go and do something terrible, that's kind of what everybody remembers.
And obviously we want to ask you on this programme how the Christian faith became real to you.
Well, it was a bit of that, one of those, blinkers coming off the eyes kind of job. I think it was the result of people who had been praying for me. I went back to London. I lived here, but I went back to London to do things. It was an extraordinary, it's probably too long a story to go into, but I was met an actor who I'd been in a show with 15 years before, who'd become a Christian, extraordinary circumstances. And the first thing I said to him, because I'd heard he'd become a Christian, was, "Are you a Christian still?" And he said, "Yes." And I just must have been just ready to hear. And it was like my eyes just opened, and then suddenly I was a Christian. Suddenly I knew. I'd actually gone down to my mother's house in the country to fast and pray, and I read David Watson's book. And at the back of that, there was the Sinner's Prayer. And I'd knelt down in her room and said that the night before. And I had a wonderful friend called Joanna Cooper, I'd been in a play at the Royal Lyceum in Edinburgh. She was the only Christian I'd known. And I rang her up and she said, "Oh, what's the matter?" And I said, "Oh, I'd been living out in the bush in Queensland, and I'd felt very kind of connected to God somehow, not really knowing who he was. But I said, I feel like I've lost God." And she came down. She said, "Oh, I'm coming down, a Scottish girl." And she said, "Okay, we'll go to the cathedral to pray." She was a Methodist. And I said, "Oh, for goodness sake, Joanna." And she said, "No, we'll go and pray." And so we went off to pray. And the next day, Peter turned up, Krishka, and it was amazing, really.
Look, and like David Watson's in Fear No Evil, he was a Christian leader who went through difficult times.
Yeah.
Your life's had that side to it too, haven't you? In the loss of a husband, going through that experience. You've had the ups and the downs.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And I think being, being very, I think I was a very broken person as a young person. I had lots of issues and problems with boarding school. And of course, I was in London in the 60s where, 60s and 70s, they say, if you remember being there, you weren't really there. So there were times when, you did a lot of drug taking and drinking, and it wasn't great. It definitely wasn't great. It definitely left its mark.
And you lived on Abbey Road. Well, I mean, that's right in the middle of it all, isn't it? I've told people even go now to look at the crossing where the four lads walked across, really.
Right.
Look, if you had one role or one part of all of that experience for you in acting that you remember most, what would it be?
Well, I think really the most memorable thing for me was going to, Cliff Richard had an organisation called the Arts Centre Group. And I was a very new Christian, and I was in my 30s. I wasn't, a kid. And I'd had this amazing experience of becoming born again, but there was part of me that was going, oh, it's just, I'm just looking for a crutch, or, it's not real, or so on and so. And I went there that night, and there were two Christian actors there, and they said, "Can we pray for you?" And I said, "Oh, whatever you like," kind of thing. I kind of thought, "Oh well, what?" And they prayed for me to be filled with the Holy Spirit, and it was the most unbelievable experience. And I knew nothing about speaking in tongues or any of that sort of stuff, and it was just extraordinary. And I think all that year, when I kept thinking this isn't real, really, I've just, I remembered that experience, and that's what kept me.
And today, we're going to hear a little bit from you in a moment. Today you're going into schools and helping people and in terms of seeing things through drama, I think, which is a great avenue for many, many people. Jen, I'll come back to you a bit later, and it's great to have you on the show and sharing with us. I think that's really good. She's going to showcase some of her storytelling work performing Along the Path.
It's been 200 years since the first Methodists met in Australia. To celebrate 2 centuries of faith and pioneering care, CEO and presenter Reverend Dr. Keith Garner takes us back to where it all began.
But we don't begin here at the heart of London. We begin in a town in the north of England.
In this fascinating narrative, Reverend Garner chronicles the history of the life and times of the founder of Methodism, John Wesley. This fresh and thought-provoking documentary takes us on a journey throughout the United Kingdom, beginning in John Wesley's hometown of Epworth.
John Wesley was born here on the 17th of June, 1703.
This 1-hour DVD travels onto his education years and beginnings of social justice in Oxford, to his final years in London. For more information on John Wesley, the man and his mission, call 02 9263 5555 or email us at impacttv@wesleymission.org.au. Caring for a child with disability is more than a full-time job. It's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, non-stop caring. Help us give carers a break before they break down.
A water bearer in India had 2 large pots, each hung on each end of a pole, which he carried across his neck. One of the pots had a crack in it, and while the other pot was perfect and always delivered a full portion of water at the end of the long walk from the stream to the master's house, the cracked pot arrived only half full. For full 2 years, this went on daily, with the bearer delivering only 1.5 pots to the master's house. Of course, the perfect pot was proud of his accomplishments, perfect to the end for which it was made. But the poor, cracked pot was ashamed of his own imperfection and miserable that he was only able to accomplish half of what it had been made to do. After 2 years of what it perceived to be bitter failure, it spoke to the water bearer one day by the stream. "I'm ashamed of myself, and I want to apologize to you." "Why?" asked the bearer. "What are you ashamed of?" "I've been able for these past 2 years to deliver only half my load because this crack in my side causes water to leak out all the way back to your master's house. Because of my flaws, you have to do all this work and you don't get full value for your efforts," the pot said. The water bearer felt sorry for the old cracked pot. And in his compassion he said, "As we return to the master's house, I want you to notice the beautiful flowers along the path." Indeed, as they went up the hill, the old cracked pot took notice of the sun warming the beautiful wildflowers on the side of the path, and this cheered him some. But at the end of the trail, it still felt bad because it had leaked out half its load, and so again the pot apologized to the bearer for its failure. The bearer said to the pot, "Did you notice that there were flowers only on your side of the path, not on the other side?" "That's because I've always known about your flaw, and I took advantage of it. I planted flower seeds on the side of the path, and every day, while we walk back from the stream, you've watered them. For 2 years, I've been able to pick these beautiful flowers to decorate my master's table. Without you being just the way you are, he would not have this beauty to grace his house." You know, each of us has our own unique flaws. But if we allow it, the Lord will use our flaws to grace his Father's table. In God's great economy, nothing goes to waste. I'm learning not to be afraid of my flaws, trusting that in our weakness we find our strength. As in 2 Corinthians 12 verse 9 says, "My gracious favor is all you need. My power works best in your weakness."
Now, in these characters of the New Testament, Paul, in some senses, is a living paradox. Just think for a minute of the various aspects that are true about him. He's a strict and pious Jew of good standing. He's a native of Tarsus in Cilicia, a freeman of the Roman Empire. He believed in the special privileges of Judaism on the one hand, and yet he becomes an apostle to the Gentiles. He was passionate, but he was something of a mystic also. All of that's true about him. But when Paul tells his story later on in the Acts of the Apostles, when we read that story of what happened to him, we get a picture of what the transformation was really all about. In Acts 22, I'm going to read verses 6 and 7, and then 10, 12, and 15. So first of all, in 22, 6 and 7. "About noon, as I came near Damascus, suddenly a bright light from heaven flashed around me. I fell to the ground and heard a voice say to me, 'Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?' 'Who are you, Lord?' I asked." And then later on in verse 10 in the same chapter, "What shall I do, Lord?" I asked. "Get up," the Lord said, "and go into Damascus. There you'll be told all that you've been assigned to do." And then it reads on further on in verse 12, "A man named Ananias came to see me. He was a devout observer of the law and highly respected by all the Jews living there." And then further on in verse 15, "You will be his witness to all people of what you've seen and heard." You see, Paul was changed, but he was then given a purpose. Paul wasn't one of the original 12, but was considered an apostle in his own mind because of the unique nature of his conversion. From the comparative obscurity of Tarsus, reflects upon his life, can fill libraries the world over. He becomes a missionary. He reaches a whole world of people, and he eventually gets to Rome. Now, when he wrote the letter to the Romans, probably the most preached and read of all the epistles Paul ever had, and wrote, you know, the one that has perhaps guided communities and guided Christian thinking, he'd never been to Rome, but he anticipated one day getting there, and he did. But when he arrives there, he will be in chains. He had an amazing ability to cross boundaries, to make Christ available for many. For me, the key to all this is summed up in the words of some of his texts. At the beginning of Romans, he says, I'm not ashamed of the gospel. And then in Corinthians, he said, I've become all things to all people. See, Paul might be the source of much conjecture and even disagreement, but what is indisputable is that when this conversion happened, Christianity took on a whole new way of living, and it spread throughout not only the whole Roman Empire, but to the ends of the earth. A marvellous conversion experience. We've heard of a conversion experience earlier, as Gennie has told us something of her own life. It lies at the heart of all of our lives. Sometimes it happens in a moment. Sometimes it happens over a period of time. And even when it happens in a moment, we look back and we say to ourselves, gosh, people were praying for me, people were helping me, and I can see how some of those little pieces all now fit into place. So this apostle wasn't ashamed of Christ. He never would be. And if we follow Jesus Christ, if we're engaged in the good news of the gospel, if we're involved, whether it's in our local church or beyond, we need to be a people prepared to stand up for what we believe to be right. Sometimes that's standing up for those things that we need to be about in terms of justice in our society. Sometimes it's engaging and discussing and debating the issues of the day. But in all things, it is to be true to what we believe is right in Christ. So I'm grateful of all these characters in the New Testament that we've managed to find a place for Paul. Possibly the best of all the apostles in terms of the communication skills that he had. Many of them were written skills. Many of them were building situations where he could cross the bridges. But in all things, the honour was given to Christ. For you can't tell the story of Saul, who became Paul, without talking of the God in Jesus Christ who changed him. Now, we don't all change our names. We generally keep our own names. Some change them when they get married or when they enter into relationships. But for all of us, we are changed if we belong to Christ. That change is deep, it's profound, it's transformational. It affects the way that we live, it affects the way we talk, it affects the way we see the world. Gennie quite rightly said to us earlier that perhaps her worldview was affected very much by her acting, which was her life. All of us are affected by the world around us. But the great thing is this, that the wonderful attraction of Christ can give us a new vision and a new purpose. And if you've never found that the warmth and attraction of Jesus Christ, you can open your heart and you can find him, you can know him, you can believe in him today.
If you would like to contact Keith and find out more about today's program, write to us at Wesley Mission, Post Office Box A5555, Sydney South 1235, or you can send an email to impacttv@wesleymission.org.au. On our website, you can catch up on past episodes of Wesley Impact, find out more about our work, read online magazines and articles, and connect with us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. You can also connect to Keith's blog and stay up to date on all of the latest news and information from Wesley Mission. wesleymission.org.au.
Thank you for joining us today. I hope you've enjoyed the discussion and reliving some television memories perhaps with Gennie Nevinson. If you'd like to find out more about any part of today's episode or more of the work that we do at Wesley Mission, don't hesitate to be in touch. To be in touch with us via website, via email. You can write to me at impacttv@wesleymission.org.au or simply visit the website to see the work, wesleymission.org.au. To watch past episodes of Wesley Impact, simply scroll down the page and click on Wesley Impact, and you can watch this programme or many other programmes day or night. It was from the earliest days that a scholar and thinker of the Jewish community, his life was changed and transformed in following Jesus Christ. Look, Gennie, as a Christian in the world in which you operate, if somebody came to you and were looking for advice, they were a Christian and they wanted to enter the entertainment industry, what would you say to them?
Well, I think I would say to examine very closely their purpose. I think in everything we do, once you become a Christian, it has to be to glorify God, really. And I would say that we're made in God's image, that we're creative people, and if that's what you feel is where you're at, then go for it.
Go for it, and you've certainly done that. Thank you for joining us today, and God bless you.
Wesley Mission connects with more than 1,200 young people each year through Wesley Street Smart. To find out more, visit wesleymission.org.au.